Hi there, and welcome to my second Members Q&A video. This was originally planned for January, but I didn't have time to sort it out then, and then after that I had an awful cold in February that significantly impacted the production of all my videos for a couple of weeks, throwing my whole schedule out the window. So now here we are at the end of March and I've finally got around to recording this. As you probably already know, memberships are active on my channel, and on screen you can see my Supporters Hall of Fame, which consists of 10 fine folks who are willing to pay a monthly fee to give them access to various perks, and one of those is to periodically ask me questions for me to answer. They can be about anything, but generally they are of course about gaming. If you're interested in becoming a member and supporting my channel, please click on the join button below this video for more information. Membership starts from just 99p a month. If you're not able to offer financial support, then you can still help the channel out by liking and sharing my videos to help feed the YouTube algorithm, exposing my videos to more people. Any support you can offer is very much appreciated. Now on to the Q&A, and if you look at the membership tiers, the idea is that level 3 members get to ask several questions, and the lower levels either get one or none. But unfortunately, my only level 3 member didn't ask anything, so in the end I just asked all my members to submit questions and I've picked out the best of them. Let's get started, and I'll begin with a question from Warren Pilkington, aka Woz, who asked, when you get your newly acquired Commodore 16 fixed, which games that are exclusive to that format are you looking forward to playing? Now Warren's referring to something that I revealed on one of my members only videos a couple of months ago, which is that I bought a Commodore 16 with a bunch of games just before Christmas. Unfortunately I found that it didn't work, and as yet I haven't got around to trying to fix it. I really do need to get onto that. At the moment it's just sat on top of the box that it came in on the floor of my games room. Anyway, assuming that I do eventually get it working, and to answer the question, I think the obvious games that stand out to me are the ones from Mastertronic and Firebird that are exclusive to the C16. Obviously I've got an affinity for Mastertronic and Firebird games, as evidenced by my Commodore 64 Focus series for both companies. So yeah, to be honest, the main reason I bought the Commodore 16, and it did come bundled with a bunch of Mastertronic games by the way, is to take a look at the budget titles for the Commodore 16, see if there's any exclusive games worth shouting about, and also see how the Commodore 16 versions of games that came out on the C64 compare. So that's something you may be able to look forward to on my channel in the future, if I can get that C16 to work of course. The next question comes from Andy K, who asks, what game on the C64 took you ages to crack? For example, the first couple of months you didn't get on with it, but then you worked out how to do something and it all fell into place. He gave the example of using the bombs on Non Terraqueous, which is a game I played in my Mastertronic Chronicles series, though not one I particularly enjoyed. Now this is actually a very good question, but I really struggled to think of an answer for it. I couldn't think of any game I played back when I was a kid that fitted this description. Generally speaking, if I couldn't get into a game quite quickly, I'd just abandon it and play something else instead. However, there is a game I've played quite recently that kind of fits this description. It certainly wasn't a couple of months of me playing it before I got into it, but the game I'm thinking of is Cyberdyne Warrior, which was part of the 4th Dimension compilation that I looked at on my channel back in October 2023. This game looks and sounds great, but it is quite difficult, and I wasn't really making a great deal of progress in it until I realised there was a strategy for each level. On each of the colourful flick screen stages, you've got to find a number of robots and then return to a specific point on the screen, which then transports you to a shop where you can replenish ammo, health and so on, and then return to the level to continue. Initially I was trying to do too much at once in this game, as I tried to get more than one droid at a time and ended up stranded in an area of the level where I hadn't got enough health or ammo to return back to the teleport point. So the strategy I eventually learned is don't try and do too much at once, get one droid at a time and then go to the shop to restock on ammo or health, and then repeat until the level's complete. You also definitely need to learn the level layouts to avoid losing tons of health in certain areas. Once all that dawned on me, I did find the game much more enjoyable, and it is a fantastic looking and really well programmed piece of work. The next question comes from Voxel.net, who asks, have you ever created any games, whether for modern systems or retro ones? Well, these days I don't really have the time or inclination to be programming games, as I spend all my working life sat in front of a computer, and quite a lot of time at home as well. I have had a few game ideas over the years though, so you never know, one day I might sit down and try and code one. Back when I was a kid though, I loved the idea of creating my own games, and I spent a lot of time using shoot 'em up construction kit on the Commodore 64 to create all kinds of different games. Some of those I managed to get recovered from the original discs about 15 years ago, and there are actually 3 videos on my channel where I show those off, so check them out if you've not seen them before. I'll put links to them in the pinned comment. Before I got my Commodore 64, I also spent a lot of time typing in games from magazines on the BBC Micro, which was the inspiration of course for my History of BBC Micro Typing Games series. And by the way, that will be coming back eventually, I've just been really short of time to produce them at the moment. Having learnt quite a bit from typing in other people's games, I did try and create my own version of Tetris for the BBC Micro during one of the school summer holidays. I remember getting as far as producing a title screen, drawing the well on the screen, getting the pieces to randomly generate at the top and fall down to the bottom of the well, and even having the ability to rotate and move them. What I never managed to do though is get them to land on top of each other, so everything just fell to the bottom of the playfield and stayed there. After making that initial progress and getting stuck, I probably lost interest, and unfortunately the code has long since been lost to history. To be honest, writing Tetris in BASIC was probably never going to be a good idea anyway. The next question comes from Avant1277, who says, I would love to know how your arcade outhouse, for want of a better phrase, is going. Do you use it as much as you thought? Would you do anything differently? And does your dog go in there with you? So for those of you who aren't aware, about 11 years ago I had a new garage built with the intention of installing a load of arcade machines in there, and that's exactly what I did. There's a video all about this on my channel which I'll put a link to in the corner of the screen now. And I'll also put a bit of footage from the Blue Moose arcade, which is what we call it, as it stands right now. As you can see from the video footage, it's actually serving more the purpose of a garage than an actual arcade at the moment, as we recently bought some new dining room furniture which is sat in there until we get rid of the old stuff. So that leads on nicely to me answering the first of the three questions, which is, do you use it as much as you thought? Well, absolutely not. I'd say for about 360 days a year it pretty much sits there with all the machines switched off and nothing in use. Unfortunately, real life and other pursuits such as producing content for this channel and my theme park enthusiasm means I don't have many weekends free, and as a result the arcade doesn't really get a look in. We do try and have a couple of parties in there every year, but that's about it, and I don't spend anywhere near the time I'd like to maintaining the machines. There's 3 or 4 of them that have never worked from the day I bought them, and several others that have broken and I've never had a chance to repair. So to answer the second question, would I do anything differently? Well, the one thing I probably shouldn't have done was have the thing built in the first place. It was definitely a very frivolous thing to do, but I will say that it was a good investment because it's had a huge amount of value to our house, way more than it actually cost to build the thing. And the other thing is that all the machines that are in there are now worth 3 or 4 times more than what I paid for them. So if you look at it as an investment, then it was a good thing. So putting aside whether it should have ever been built in the first place, the one thing I probably would have done differently is instead of having all arcade machines in there, I probably would have put a kind of kitchen worktop across the back wall and had TVs and consoles permanently set up along there. That is something I could still do, of course, if I could be bothered. And to answer the final question, does your dog go in there with you? Well, not really. He does tend to wander in now and then when we do have the machines on, but he doesn't really like the noise. It probably sounds like I'm being quite negative about it, but it is a really cool thing to have in the back garden, and when I do get friends round to play in it, they all have a great time, so that does make it kind of worthwhile, even though it probably was a very indulgent and foolhardy investment, to be honest. Next up is a question from PXL Cool, or is it Pixel Cool? I'm never quite sure, and the question is, what reimagining of a computer would you want to be made, or a top 3, and he means one with a fully working keyboard. This question is obviously inspired by the recent releases of the likes of a full-size Commodore 64 and Spectrum with working keyboard, and PXL Cool did mention that he was currently trying to get the Spectrum in the US, and that's why the question was on his mind. And he did also mention that he'd like to see a full-size BBC Micro, but in an Electron case. As for me, well, seeing a full-size recreation of the Bee with the ability to load games via a USB port would be quite cool, but actually because my preference is to use real hardware wherever possible, I'd pick 3 computers that I've never actually used in real life and are also prohibitively expensive to get hold of. I also know that all 3 of these have some interesting games on them, so there would be some commercial viability for them, although not as much as the likes of the C64 and Spectrum. The first one I thought of was an Acorn machine, the Archimedes. This was the 32-bit successor to the BBC Micro series that came out around the same time as the Amiga and Atari ST. I saw plenty of press about the Archimedes in the Acorn magazines back in the late 80s, but I don't remember ever seeing one in the flesh. The second home computer I'd like to see a modern day recreation of is a Japanese exclusive, the Sharp X68000. I don't know a huge amount about this computer, but I do know that it's home to some great arcade conversions and also some interesting original games. Some of those are probably pretty heavy on Japanese language, so it would also need some translation work to be done if it was going to be marketed in the West. And the final computer I thought of is a successor to one I do own, which is the MSX2, obviously the successor to the MSX. I guess ultimately what I'd be looking for here is a system that's compatible with all the MSX versions, and by doing so it opens up a huge library of interesting games from places like Japan, Holland and Spain, where the MSX was especially popular. Will modern day versions of any of these computers ever become available? I highly doubt it, but we can dream. Up next is a question from WizWords, who asked, why do you like Bubble Bobble so much and did you have the C64 version as a kid? Now there's a bit of backstory to this one because WizWords is also known as Graham Mason, who's a good friend of mine that I've known for over 15 years, and he's a gaming focused writer by profession and writes for the likes of Retro Gamer amongst others. He was recently commissioned to write a feature about the Bubble Bobble series for Retro Gamer, and knowing that I'm a big fan of the game, we were chatting about the many home conversions of the games and sequels to it. I even provided him with my own checklist of games in the series, as I myself have plans to create a short series about Bubble Bobble, its many conversions, sequels, spin-offs and clones. If that's something you'd like to see on this channel, then let me know in the comments. Anyway, back to the question. I'll answer the second part first, which is, did I have the C64 version as a kid? Yes, I did. It was the version I played most when I was a kid, although I did play the arcade original first. As for why I like it so much, well, what's not to like is the obvious answer, but to get into a little bit more detail, it's a game with many levels, and I don't mean the 100 levels that the game consists of. What I mean is that initially it seems like quite a simple game, it's very easy to get into, and the first 8 or 9 levels aren't going to cause many people too much problems. But after that it starts to get a lot more challenging as the level layouts get more complicated and the enemies get more devious. It's also got a lot more depth and complexity than it first seems to. The appearance of special items in the game seems quite random, but in fact it's all calculated, and if you can work out how to trigger the appearance of certain items, you can boost your score massively. There are also several other scoring techniques that can be exploited, and while the game is most appealing due to its simultaneous 2-player mode, if you really want to rack up a big score, you need to play it on your own. Add in the super cute appealing graphics and that amazingly catchy theme tune, not to mention super precise controls, and you end up with a game that's just as attractive as it is addictive and playable. So there you go, Graham, that's why I like Bubble Bobble and it's my all-time favourite game. By the way, if you're a fan of the ZX Spectrum, as well as writing for the likes of Retro Gamer, Graham also produces a monthly newsletter for Specky fans called On the ZX Spectrum, which is completely free, although he does offer perks if you want to sign up as a Patreon. I'll put a link to On the ZX Spectrum in the pinned comment of this video. For the next question, I'm going back to Warren Pilkington, who asked, what C64 compilation would you like to own that you don't already have? I've accumulated a huge number of collections for my Commodore 64 compilation comparison series, probably enough to last the next 2 or 3 years, and as a result that means there's not actually that many that I'm still looking for. There are a few that spring to mind though, and the first of those is Taito Coin-Op Hits, which is a compilation of 8 arcade conversions that were originally released by Taito in the arcades. I had this compilation when I was a kid, and I remember enjoying several of the titles on it, most notably Bubble Bobble, which I've just been talking about. The other 2 compilations I like to get hold of are budget compilations, and they don't have any nostalgic value, but they do contain some games that I am interested in. Firstly, there's Triple Decker 7 from Alternative Software, which does seem quite hard to get hold of. This contains 3 games that were originally released by Mr. Chip Software and written by Sean Southern, whose games are usually of a high standard. And the other budget compilation is Quattro Skills from Codemasters. Again, this one seems more difficult to get hold of than some of the other Quattro compilations, and it's got a couple of games on it that I've played before and was quite impressed with, so it might rank quite highly in my compilation league table. It's now time for the final question in this Q&A, and this came from James Welch, who asked, why do stories make the best YouTubers? I think though that was a typo, and what he actually meant to ask was, why do Stokies make the best YouTubers? And the reason I think he's asking that is that James is, like myself, from Stoke-on-Trent. As for the answer to the question though, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's because people from Stoke have quite a dry sense of humour, the perfect mixture of cynicism and sarcasm you might say. Or perhaps it's just that people like listening to our delightful accent. If you've got any suggestions for why people from Stoke make the best YouTubers, let me know in the video comments. That brings this, my second members Q&A, to an end. If you've got any thoughts about anything I've said in this video, then let me know in the video comments. I'd like to give a big thank you to all my channel members for submitting the questions and for their ongoing support of the channel. And if you'd like to get involved in one of these Q&As in the future and get lots of other interesting perks, then please click on the join button below this video to find out what membership is all about. That's all for now, so thanks very much for watching this video, and until the next one, see ya!